Happy New Year, folks. Are you sick of it? Are you sick of hearing Happy New Year? Do you feel compelled to somehow improve your state of being because people are telling you, have a Happy New Year? Have it. Experience it. Elevate yourself. Isn't that the human condition? Maybe it's an American thing, but we're supposed to always do better this year than we did last year. And then you look back over your life and you realize, I kind of peaked around 21. Kind of been a slow decline since I don't know, maybe in some ways better, some ways worse. I think I'd probably play smarter. I don't play as strong. Obviously, I'm 55 years old, but I think I play smarter. I'm like Jordan, dropping back, learning how to drop threes, learning how to make more assists, still contributing to the team. But I'm not jumping over your head with my legs spread anymore. No. But you know what? Have a happy new year. Have a happy one. That's even a relative term. Who knows what happy is? It's is happiness a better life? Every study I find says that no, you should have a fulfilling life. You read about all these Harvard and Yale professors that teach classes on happiness, and they go back to Plato, and they go back to who's the anyway, my mind's blank. I'm just going to try to focus more. That's all I can do. I'm going to try to stay in it more. I'm going to try to be a guy who shows up for work every day, makes a big hot cup of coffee in his Blue Ox mug. Thanks to everybody, by the way, who bought the Sunday Papers mugs. They're all sold out. We went through 2 different types of cups. They all sold out. And we cleared upwards of $7 each. So it was really good. It was a good project for us. I think we're really glad we did it. I mean, I was happy just to get the mugs in people's hands. I love when people send me Instagram photos of them listening to the Sunday Papers with their mugs. I think it's nice. I think we're part of your life. That feels good. You're part of mine. And that keeps me going. I know I'm depressed because I was just on the road for a week and I didn't even jerk off. And the sad thing is I watched porn. That's how you know you're depressed. When you're watching porn and you're not spanking it. That's like a voyeur of a voyeur. That's like 3 steps removed from actually fucking. You know, because my porn is voyeur porn. I like the hidden camera shit. I don't want anyone acting. I want the real deal. And now I'm watching somebody watch that. But now I'm home and things are looking up. Threw a move on the wife last night. Welcome back. Boom. I don't know if it was a boom. It was a kapow. It was at the very least a couple of cat guns. And one of those fireworks you throw at the ground when you're 11 and it pops. It was at least that. I don't know if it was a boom. You'd have to ask her. Maybe she'll start a podcast this year. I got my goddamn dog in my office because she's getting so senile that if we leave her at home, she runs around in circles barking and then tries to scratch her way out of the door. So she kind of has to be in someone's presence all the time now. So I'm going to turn into that guy who's normally a homosexual, who always has his small dog in his arms, and who, you know, talks too much about the dog. There's no photos. I think if you know me, you know I've probably never posted a photo of my dog. I have 2 dogs. One of them is my dog, though, I consider. And that's the ornery one. I have to take him. Nobody else wants him. So I talked a little bit about Florida. I had a real nice week with my mom down there, and I talked a little bit about going to church with her on Christmas morning with the kids, which I love. Look, I was raised Irish Catholic. I still have a place in my heart for the traditions of the church. There's obviously things about the church that are bothersome, to say the least. But it's also a place that, those songs and prayers mean something. And the priest was an old Irish priest, which was especially nice because that's what I grew up with, the old Irish ones. And he was talking about, and there's nobody in the church. Nobody in the church is wearing a fucking mask. It was like my family and one other family, and there's like 300 people in there. Nobody's wearing a mask. And then they had the gall to send out a prayer to all the people that have died of COVID. It's like, hey, how about you don't pray, but you put a fucking mask on? How about that, Catholics? You fucking lunatics. Catholics are an interesting group because, it is primarily Irish and Italian, and then you have the Latino churches, so they don't mix as much. There seems to be churches that are mostly Irish and Italian, and they are the same guy. He's got the crew cut. He's just had it cut. He had it cut the morning of church. They don't fuck around, and they're always clean shaven, fucking aftershave, a starched shirt, a family with too many fucking kids in it, a wife who looks like she's on a lot of committees. It's an A-type family, the Catholics. And they're good people. They really are. They walk the walk. They do good service. They donate money. I'm not knocking the Catholics. I'm just saying they're a little uptight. They won't abort. Abort the mission. Sometimes you got to abort the mission. And then I was just thinking about also Jesus Christ's birthday. If you don't believe in Jesus Christ, that's a bummer for you because you're celebrating his fucking birthday, whether you want to or not. Your boss won't let you come into work on Jesus Christ's birthday. Like you should be buying a cake and blowing out candles. You are forced to take a day of no pay so that you can sit and think and ponder. This man, this 33-year-old carpenter from the Middle East who miraculously has white skin and blue eyes. There's the first Christmas miracle, that he's not a black guy. And you think about the entire world, not the entire world, most of the world stops down for this guy's birthday. I think about my birthday. I'm lucky if I get maybe a half a dozen texts from some friends, a gift from each family member, that all bought by my wife in the names of my children who are old enough now that they should be buying their whatever. Got some good gifts from the kids this year. My son got me these sneakers. I'll hold them up for the camera right now. They're a little loud. They're New Balance, so I guess I'm that age. And I don't know. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing that great. But I don't really need any. I'm an adult. If I need something, I fucking buy it. I'm not broke. Unless you're going to buy me a car. Anyway. Down in Florida, a lot of people that are friends of my mother's, and she'd introduced me to them, and it's such a cliche, but all they talk about is their grandkids, and they want to tell you how great their fucking grandkids are, how amazing they are, but they also don't remember anything. So every conversation is like, yeah, my son is working with that guy. Who's that guy now? He's in his company. He's the guy who's got the, he lives in Texas now. He used to live in California. He's got the electric cars. And you go, Elon Musk? Yeah, Elon Musk. Anyway, so he met my son at that restaurant. It's a restaurant in L.A. You know that restaurant in L.A. It's a famous sushi place. It's in Venice Beach and Windward Sur. You know, Hama Sushi? Yeah, Hama Sushi. So, and it's a game. It's a game show. Put up some pedestals, get some prize money, roll the cameras. We got a fucking game show in Florida called Granny Can't Fucking Remember Shit. There we go. I did some shows in Connecticut and Jersey. Thanks for the people that came out. I know that was a leap of faith and probably an error in judgment if it was, if you're obese or you have poor health. But people came out. People came out New Year's Eve. It was a smaller crowds than normal. but people did come out, and the shows in New Brunswick at the Stress Factory were a little rough. It was in a tent outside with some loud-ass heaters. It's a beautiful room. Vinnie Brand set it up, but it's still a tent. Don't kid yourself. It was a long hour. It was a long hour up there. And then Connecticut, he's got a club in Bridgeport that's amazing. Really nice club. Bridgeport is a town that has not recovered from going bankrupt 20 years ago or so. It's a sad, sad place. The Dunkin' Donuts is the cultural center of the town. It's where people congregate, and they meander, and they have their meals there, donuts and coffee for meals. And everybody's broke, and it's very sad. It's very sad. And yet I couldn't stop going. I was fascinated by how I think my life is rough, and I think I'm having a hard time. And then you see people that are born into a world where there just isn't a lot of hope there. You don't see a lot of people achieving a lot, and it's contagious. And you can see it in people's looks on their faces that I'm not sitting here saying all poor people are sad. I'm saying that people in Bridgeport are beyond poor. It's a city that needs help. And it made me very grateful for what I have. It did. It made my problems shrink down and was I fucking tipping people in Bridgeport. If you came in contact with me and you're in the service industry, you had a good weekend last weekend in Bridgeport. Anyway, if you are needing to readjust your outlook on life, I strongly suggest in the new year a resolution could be getting yourself some therapy. This podcast is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. We talk about BetterHelp a lot on the show, and this month we're discussing some of the stigmas around mental health. A lot of people think that it makes you weak. It makes you think that you're not a strong person, which is the furthest thing from the truth. It takes strength to reach out for help before things get worse than they are now. It's preventative, and we've been taught that mental health shouldn't be a part of a normal life, but it's like going to the gym. Like, what you eat, what you put in your body is what you put in your brain, how you challenge yourself to grow and to get strong. We talked about wanting to be better all the time. Well, that's not such an unhealthy thing. So I have benefited from therapy over the years, and I talk about it openly on this show because I want to take the stigma away from it. I want you guys to know that my relationships are stronger, that my level of depression has gotten way better. I think in the last year I've talked about going to BetterHelp, and I found a great therapist on there. It's a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable, much more affordable than in-person therapy. And you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. So if you feel like you're in a crisis, don't be afraid to reach out. Give it a try. See why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp Online Therapy. And Fitzdog Radio listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Fitzdog. That's betterhelp.com/Fitzdog. Get involved. Help yourself this year. All right, here's my podcast. I did an interview. Actually, I'm about to do an interview. This is one of the rare times where I'm doing the intro before I interview the guest. So who knows? Could be a shit show, but I'm guessing it's going to be magic because Moshe is one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite people, a truly interesting life and a smart brain on this kid, this Moshe Kasher. He has a podcast, the Endless Honeymoon Podcast, with his lovely wife, Natasha Leggero, and he's been on everything. So here it is. Here's my chat with Moshe Kasher. Oh, and by the way, I should tell you, I got tour dates coming up. If you're in good health, come on out. I'll be in Boston, Laugh Boston, January 13th through the 15th. And then I will be in Helium in Portland on the 20th through the 22nd of January. Tickets at fitzdog.com. And don't forget the premium membership. Start off your new year with 870 back episodes of Fitzdog Radio for just less than $20 for the year. Support the show and enjoy more of the podcast. Okay, here's Moshe. Hey, Moshe.
Hi, Greg. How you doing?
How often has your name been mispronounced in your life? Moshe?
Moshe, I don't even mind. Moshe sounds like Moshe is not truly a mispronunciation. It's like it's a Yiddish pronunciation, so it feels like I'm talking to an old uncle. Except if the person's last name is Fitzsimmons, then I know they're mocking me, right? But Moshe, I don't mind. But I've been called every bastardized permutation of my name possible, so many times.
When I lived in Little Italy, it was all Italian women that lived in my building, and I was on the 6th floor of a 6th-floor walk-up, and everybody left their doors open. It was, it was like a thing where everybody wanted to know what was going on all the time, and so I would walk. They
would hang their laundry outside as well and sing opera when the sun was setting.
That's right, and they would only eat cheese.
That's right, okay.
And so I would walk upstairs past all these open doors, and all these ladies would all call me Kevin.
Why?
Because I was the only Irish person they knew, and so that was like their slander.
They called you Officer Kevin? Hey, it's Officer Kevin. Dude, I once, I was thinking about this story recently. I once worked with, early in my comedy career, I worked with the great David Feldman, who I'm sure you know quite well. You know David Feldman, yes?
Love David Feldman, yeah.
One of the great dark joke writers and big-time Jew. And in other words, no one ever mistook him for a police officer. And early in my career, I was opening for him at Rooster T. Feathers, the illustrious comedy club and home of the world's first pinball machine. And
is that true?
Yeah, apparently that was the site of the first pinball machine ever. Yeah.
This is why you are a great podcast guest, is not only do you get a good, strong narrative, there's these great little asides. There's these little deep dives.
But you know what? Now that I'm thinking of it, I think I'm wrong. I think it was the home of the first Pong, the first video game console, I think, which makes more sense because it's right in the heart of Silicon Valley. But David Feldman, when he heard my name, Moshe Kasher, was so struck and overwhelmed with a tsunami of internalized decades of Jew self-hatred that I don't know if you know the green room setup at Rooster T. Feathers, but there's two options. It's either you're in a supply closet next to like 4-gallon cans of nacho cheese sauce and jalapenos, or you're in an alley outside of the club in the cold. And I don't remember which it was, but we sat in the green room as he had an argument with himself for 45 minutes about whether or not I should change my name to make it in Hollywood if it was too Jewy. And I wasn't even participating. It would be him just going like, Moshe Kasher. You can't go by Moshe Kasher. Nobody will ever work with somebody with a name that Jewy. You got to change your name. What am I talking about? You can't change your name. It's a new era. We don't subscribe to that bullshit anymore. Stay who you are. Change it. Be Moshe Kasher. No, don't be Moshe Kasher. And I'm sitting there going like, I don't really know you. I'm not going to change my name. It was never on the docket for me to change my name. But anyway, so that's how Jewy of a name I had.
Yeah, it's pretty Jewy, but it's like, you can back it up. Like, there's a lot of people that have ethnic names and they have no fucking idea about them. But you grew up, what was it? Your father was Hasidic?
He was a banker.
No, he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. My father was well, that's a very complicated story. But anytime you start asking me questions about my family, it's like stepping into a spider web of like tangential asides. But my dad, my great-grandfather, see what I'm saying? You asked me about my dad, and I went back 2 generations.
Yeah, it's like a Woody Allen movie all the time.
In a Woody Allen movie, it would also have a scene with an older Jew telling a young Jew in Hollywood to change his name.
Right.
But my great-grandfather was a hardcore Hasidic Jew, and he moved from Hungary in the turn of the century to America and left my grandmother and the rest of his kids behind for like 12 years while he was in America trying to like make it in a kind of Fievel Goes West kind of reenactment situation.
Was he sending money back home?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
He didn't leave them hungry.
He was a chicken butcher. He broke chicken necks for a living, I believe.
Okay.
So by the time he finally raised enough money to send for my family, my grandmother, who was the oldest, had been alone for long enough to get to America and say, go fuck yourself to my great-grandfather.
Oh, no shit.
So she left the flock and became an American Communist Party member and like anti-religious, like wanted nothing to do with Judaism. She hated everything to do with Judaism. She was a early civil rights marcher type of person. She married my grandfather. She wanted to leave Judaism alone so much that she married my grandfather, who was a Yiddish novelist from Poland. So she didn't leave the fold that far. And
he was an atheist?
He was a much softer atheist than she was. She was the kind of atheist that's born out of, intense religiosity. He was just a guy like, do you know who Shalom Aleichem is, the famous Yiddish novelist?
No.
Anyway, he's one of the famous people that came out of that era of writer. My grandfather wrote with him and with other kind of luminaries of the time. Yeah. So anyway, my father was then born to this atheist family who was like, fuck Judaism and fuck religion. It's the opiate of the masses. And then my dad spent his weekends with my great-grandfather kind of getting a nearly purely aesthetic appreciation for Hasidic Judaism.
Yeah.
But definitely was not raised religious. He was like a weird beatnik, an artist type his whole life. He's also deaf. You know that about me. Both my parents were deaf. And then my mom and my dad got married, and then my mom left my dad when I was like 9 months old, and in the wake of the loss of his family and the crumbling of his life, my dad became born again, became a religious Jew.
That's right.
And then
in Brooklyn, right?
In Brooklyn, in Seagate. Well, at the time he was in Queens. He became a born-again religious Jew, and then he married a woman that was even more religious, like super religious, old school, old country, so the type of person that would have made my great-grandfather proud. And then they moved to Brooklyn to a village, a shtetl, if you will, in the middle of Coney Island called Seagate, where my dad was raised his kids as Hasidic Jews, and I would pretend to be a Hasidic Jew for 6 weeks a year on my vacation to Brooklyn. I'm like a Oakland public school kid, and I would fly to Brooklyn and kind of like put on slacks and a velvet yarmulke and pretend I knew what was going on.
What about the little curls? Weren't you supposed to have the little curls?
It's an area of great shame, Greg, that you're tapping right into my childhood shame. I couldn't do the curl. The one thing you can't do, you can't rush curls, as they say.
Rush curls. No.
So
I think Phil Collins said that.
Yeah, that's right.
Can't hurry curls.
He said you just have to wait.
You just have to wait. Curls don't come easy.
So anyway, my dad would literally, this is not a joke, my dad would pick me up at the airport and drive me directly to the Hasidic Jewish barber shop and kind of plop me down in front of this old Hasid barber who would attempt to give me like the closest to what it would look like if there was overgrowth on the side of my face, but there was nothing to work with. I'm like this like secular kid with like a California 90s bowl cut, and he's like trying to like trim around the bowl to a modified bowl so that there's a little bit of like extra tuft, and that was my life. You
didn't give him a head start. You didn't say, summer's coming, let me start growing out some sideburns at least.
No, because, I mean, it's like all I ever experienced as a child, and I'm sure every child has the same experience, all you experience is like embarrassment and shame for not fitting in, Right. Back in Oakland, I was like one of the few white kids in any school, any class I was ever in. So I'm not like free to be me to start growing out my payas in January. It's like, no, I'm already a sore thumb. So I was embarrassed in Oakland. I wanted to fit in more with the black kids in Oakland than I wanted to fit in with the black and white dressed kids in Brooklyn.
That's a weird thing, phenomenon to go through, because like you said, every kid feels that need or that desire to fit in. And then you are not fitting in on so many levels. Your parents are both, what's the proper word? Hearing impaired?
Yeah, deaf we say deaf.
Let's just say deaf. So your parents are both deaf. You're getting dragged from one community you don't fit into the other. And does that actually create in you a need to fit in, or do you eventually give up and just go, I'm just going to be me because I'm not going to fit in anyway?
No, I would say that, I mean, my childhood narrative is exactly what you're describing. It's being a person that's like a shadow person, like never quite enough anywhere I walked, never quite in anywhere I walked. But I didn't get confidence until I became an adult. And then when I was so I was always feeling this like crazy hyper awareness of who I was, like stick outness, you know?
Yeah.
And part of it was comedy, honestly. It's like I could get attention. I found a way to get attention and fit in approval from everybody if I could make them laugh, right? Like, so if the black kids were laughing at me, like there's truly, and to this day, as a 42-year-old stand-up comedian, no greater compliment than being able to kill in front of a black crowd, you know?
And you can kill. White crowds don't get killed the way black crowds get killed. They also get on the ground and they punch the ground. They put their hands in the air. It's a whole other experience.
But the opposite is true too. You can't bomb for a white crowd the way you can bomb for a black crowd. The bombing is deeper. It's more crystallized. It's hard. Yeah. It hurts on a level that there will be someone in the audience that's funnier than you, making fun of how poorly you're doing. It's I once worked for this. This is really funny. I worked for Bruce a couple times early in my comedy career too. He wanted a white opener, right? And so I would go out to Pepper Bellies. Do you ever work Pepper Bellies?
No.
Oh, it's the in
San
Fairfield.
Francisco room?
The funniest part about Pepper Bellies, it's in Fairfield, the home of the Jelly. It no longer exists. Home of the Jelly Belly. The reason that it no longer exists, and this is a Brendan Walsh story, but I think I have the right to tell it. Brendan Walsh, I believe, got sent to the last week that Pepper Bellies existed, and the reason that his week got canceled was that someone was murdered inside of the club. And Brendan, he wrote his agent, and with a bunch of other shootings that had happened at comedy clubs, asking him if he wanted to book him at any of the other places where people had been killed. Anyway, I opened for Bruce, and Bruce's crowd is they're not just black, they're middle-aged. I wouldn't call them conservative, but they're like church-going, older
black,
parent black crowd. So I would get up on stage. I was the opener, and they didn't know. There was no interest in what I was doing, obviously. They were like confused as to why I was even there. Some nights, I did it 2 different weekends, so there was a lot of experience with this particular crowd. Some nights I would do well. Some nights I would do poorly. And the middle act that Bruce brought on the road with him was a comedian called Black Boy. That was his nom de plume or whatever. And so I would be charged with the responsibility of, after, having from either mediocre to extremely bad set, where nobody wanted me there in the first place, introducing a comedian without context named Black Boy with no... The crowd did not know that was in fact his name. Like all they knew was that I was there doing poorly or medium poor, and that I said this unbelievably offensive name to introduce this person. And I would I didn't. So every night I would say, I would say his credits, I would say his name, and I would put my head down. You could hear an audible, inhale from the crowd. Like, what the fuck did that white boy just say? And I would beeline for the back of the club, trying not to make eye contact with anybody. And then Black Boy would come on stage, and it was so funny. If I did well, he would say, "Give it up for my boy Moshe." Yeah, well, what a funny dude. If I did poorly, he would pretend We probably spent a full week together because it was 2 different weekends. He would pretend we'd never met before, and he would say, I don't know who the fuck that was. And I was like, black boy, you know me. I'm the guy. We've been suffering together. Like, what's happening? Anyway, that is the tale of
And then afterwards you go to a karaoke night and sing some some rap songs with the N-word in them.
Yeah. He probably wouldn't have minded. He was funny. Yeah. They were all very nice. But what was I saying? Oh, fitting in. So the truth is, all I wanted to do was fit in. Comedy helped a little bit. Acting out helped a little bit. Just being crazy. And then when I was 12,
pussy, weren't you? You were a pussy hound too, right? Wasn't that?
Not when I was 12.
Oh. All right.
I wish.
Yeah, but at 12, I mean, it's not pussy, but it's some attention from girls, probably. When did that start?
Well, that didn't start until a little bit later.
Okay.
I didn't start. To be honest, I didn't start being promiscuous until I was already until I was 16. I know that doesn't sound late, but it's a very different phase of my life than the one I'm describing. Because the way I got out of all this feeling like I didn't belong anywhere was I found drugs when I was 12. And that drugs, if nothing else, especially at 12, make all of the differences that you feel in the world fucking evaporate immediately. You get transported into the drug world and nothing matters. And that was like why I loved him so much when I was so young, because they made that feeling go away. Now, when I got to be 16, I got sober. I went to rehab a whole lot because you shouldn't be 12 and doing drugs. You can get into rehab very quickly. Then I got sober and I started going to raves, and that's when I started to be like, I am who I am. This is who I am. I'm not afraid or embarrassed anymore. And that's when I started becoming a promiscuous young man.
Right. Well, have you ever written a memoir?
Yeah, I wrote a memoir. All this stuff's contained in that memoir.
What's it called?
It's called Kasher in the Rye.
Why haven't I read it? I would love to read your book.
You should. I'm very proud of it. I'm working on a part 2 of that right now. So a lot of these stories, if I'm being overly verbose about these stories, it's because a lot of them are percolating in my mind right now because I'm going through a part 2 of it. But yeah, my book is called Kasher in the Rye. It's on Amazon and stuff, and it's the subtitle is The True Tale of a White Boy from Oakland who became a drug addict, criminal, mental patient, and then turned 16.
And and part 2 starts from what age?
Part 2 starts at 16. My first book kind of ends the day I get sober. It ends on this kind of like me saying goodbye to this old lifestyle, me, and it jumps forward just a teeny bit in these flashes. But the second book is much more of a dive into like who I became, how I got sober, all of the building blocks of my life. Up until this point, and I'm excited about this book too. But it's a bear to write. It's a much more difficult book to write than my first one.
I just got a screener for a movie, and I noticed in reading the breakdown that it's a movie about a character that grows up in a deaf home whose parents are deaf. I think it's called Omni.
You must be talking about Coda.
Oh, Coda. Right.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
I saw it, and in fact, I consulted a little bit on that. Oh
no,
because
shit!
The woman who wrote and directed it, Sean Heder, was the head writer on Little America, which is a show that I wrote on for Apple TV. But she was directing that film at the time, or she was in pre-production for that film at the time, and so she happened to be working with another. I am a CODA. CODA stands for Child of Deaf Adults, and that is who I am. That's a part of the building blocks that make me. And in fact, the chapter of my book that I'm working on right now is all about deafness, deaf history, American Sign Language, and my years, my 15 plus years as a sign language interpreter. So that's really where my brain's at right now.
Because that was the first time. And you've blown my mind many times, Moshe Kasher. But the first time you blew my mind.
Well, you too. The bit about how you have to fuck your dog to cure COVID. To me, that's as big a mind blower as anything ever. I love that bit, Greg.
Let me tell you, I thank you. I had some dog lovers in the crowd on New Year's Eve that did not.
They didn't like it.
They wouldn't shut the fuck up. They didn't just displease their pleasure at the joke by staying silent. They spoke out and then kept going, no, I do a next joke, new topic, no.
That is the ultimate example. And by the way, I don't want to miss the part where I blew your mind. That is the ultimate example of an audience not being able to understand this is a joke. It's like, on what level do they think that you're actually advocating for fucking dogs to cure COVID-19, the novel coronavirus? Like, nobody thinks you're being serious. So on what do they think it's encouraging people to try it out? Like, what? Even the idea that you're supposed to punch up or that jokes make the world worse. I mean, I get the logic of that. It doesn't apply here. Like, nobody's going to go fuck a German Shepherd because Greg Fitzsimmons.
Maybe it's like some people have a happy place. Their lives are miserable, but there's like these couple little happy places that maybe involve their pet, and they just don't want that area spoiled. They need it to stay pure.
Or maybe they have a deep and abiding consensual sexual relationship with their dog, and they don't want people making fun of that.
Yes. Or they haven't come to terms with it. Maybe it's subconscious.
Or maybe it was the idea that you were saying the only reason you'd fuck your dog is to cure a debilitating illness. Maybe they're like, well, what about just doing it for the love of the game?
The love of the game, right? And it all starts with petting. You know, I mean, where's the line from there?
It goes petting, heavy petting, and then curing COVID-19 by fucking a German Shepherd.
And at least let it be a German Shepherd, not a Shih Tzu. That's wrong.
Or a Ridgeback, honestly, so you have something to hold on to.
Oh,
you know what, Greg? This went to a dark place.
So we were doing a show at what used to be the Nerdist. Does the Nerdist still exist?
No, I don't think so. You mean Meltdown Comics?
Yeah, there was a comedy room behind a comic book store, which was just in case it wasn't nerdy and hip enough. It's so weird that nerd and hip came together, you know, in Hollywood, and they were like these two things that were diametrically opposed, and somehow they met in like the 90s on Sunset Boulevard,
and then got destroyed very quickly. I have a whole theory on this. I believe that Trump, I know you want to talk about Trump. You sent me an email saying make sure to talk about Trump as much as possible. I believe that Trump, in a weird way, was this ultimate repudiation of the nerd. Like, I think that that basically for like a decade, these nerds somehow found a way to trick like big jockey alpha guys into thinking they were losers like into like really shrinking, and they were like dominated, you know, like nerds were like alpha, or nerds were truly the apex of culture. And then, you know, all these big, strong, beefy, you know, frat boy, Mickey's swilling, like chugging Fosters and crushing a beer can on their head people were like made to feel like these impotent losers for like a solid decade. I mean, people like me were living high on the hog, but we should have known there was going to be a referendum on it. And eventually, I feel like eventually they kind of like shook the spell off and were like, wait a minute, we can kick their asses. Like, this giant tsunami of backlash came. I honestly think that there were consequences to nerds. We pushed it too far. We weren't content to just be like running the cultural show. We also had to like humiliate the people that had humiliated us in junior high school and high school, and that there were consequences to pay, and we saw those consequences on January 6th.
I blame Beck and what's his name? Patton Oswalt.
Yeah, in a way, it's all laced in. Like, you know, I mean, I really do believe that, by the way. Like, who are the biggest comedians in the world right now? They're beefy alpha bros. That's what's happening right now. Like the era of the dominant alternative comic that's like whimsically talking about, you know, comic books and pronouns. It's not that they don't have an audience. They still have an audience. But who is ascending in comedy right now? It's people that used to take those people's lunch money. And I think it's they couldn't abide that for much longer.
Yeah, and I think I've always been caught somewhere in between the two. I've never decided whether or not I'm, you know, an aggro. Like, I really have the sensibilities. I was raised to be an aggro guy, But then there's this part of me, maybe because I was so close to my mom, I could never commit to it, to really getting a bench press and really maybe, listening to metal instead of singer-songwriters. I never fully crossed over. And it's worked against me because I could be on top right now.
I feel the same way, Greg. On a comedy level, I feel like I've always been a person, and you're kind of similar in this way, although like you've been doing comedy for a lot longer, so maybe the rules weren't as applicable when you started. But like to me, it was like this choice between, when I started, between like alt and club. And I'm from the Bay Area where we didn't even have enough stage time options at the time to really actually make that choice. So I've always felt like I'm a person that's purposely, both in my performance, but also just in my kind of the way I look at comedy and the way I look at the world a little bit, in kind of in the middle of those things. And you would think that would get everybody to like you, but in fact, it makes no one like you.
Exactly. It's so true. It's like that, it's almost like how TV splintered into a lot of cable channels and people can get exactly what they want. And part of getting what they want is being the ability to dislike the other stuff.
Absolutely.
And to become identified with their cable channel.
Well, no, nothing is truer in modern society than that all of society has devolved into team sports. Like, that's all that this is. Everybody's got their team. But when I started comedy, I mean, when did you start?
89.
89 so the 80s boom was over already when you started, right?
I caught the tail end of it.
Yeah, because like when I started, it was like, I started in like 2001, and it was when a person that looked like me at that time, when a person that looked like me, when I told people who were in my social circle, like I do stand-up comedy, they would go like, what? Like no one could compute that a person that looked like me, kind of hipstery or whatever, was doing stand-up. Like it was only like Patton and Janine, and like there was this small group of people that then took over and became this dominant force in comedy. And then, but now every single person that looks like me does stand-up comedy, whether it's true or not. They'll be like journalist, civil rights educator, stand-up comedian will be their bio on Twitter. Like every person does stand-up. And then, but there were so few people doing stand-up that I felt like we didn't have the right to separate into squads, into teams. Like it was just like everybody did comedy, so you got along with everybody. You didn't talk shit about anybody. You just kind of like, there were only so many comedians. And now I think there's just so many comedians that you can have, like you said, you can have CNN, you can have ONN or OAN, you can have Fox News, you can have NPR, you can have Fresh Air, like you can have it all. And and there's enough people and enough comedy fans and enough comics to support everybody from Antifa to the Proud Boys. There's a comedian for you out there.
Yeah, it's true, and I think that it's allowed comedians to go a little bit more comfortably into being who they really are on stage, because you can have between your Twitter following and your podcast and your dates that could be at rock clubs, or they could be at bars, they could be at coffee houses. Because the truth is, if you can get 100 people to show up and spend $20 each, that's a good take for the night. That's all you need. And then if your podcast,
all I want, what is it? I think Duncan Trussell said, all I want is 100,000 fans around the country.
Right.
That's all I need to just sustain me for the rest of my career. Just like, you come out this way, you come out this city, and I'll be good. I'll pay the bills, and I'll do what I love.
And it's kind of uncool to be super famous now. It's like, who wants it? Who wants to be harassed by TMZ? Who wants to be, under scrutiny all the time? Who wants to get Me Too'd? You have less chance of being Me Too'd when people are like, me who? To me, it's like, fly under the radar. I always joke that I crawled my way to the middle and I'm staying right there. It's a sweet spot.
Well, you've got that great bit about that, about how that's not even a part of your framing, this desire for fame. And I'm getting to that point too, where I'm just like, my career is good. I've got enough fans to come out to see me. I get enough writing work to pay my bills, and the stand-up pays my bills too. And like, this will be good. I'm good. I worked hard, and I have enough stuff that I can pay the rent and get food.
Right. And And I think that there's something to be said about like being able to walk down the street also, and to be able to have a dinner with your family without people coming up and asking for an autograph. Problem with
me is I can't do that, and it's not because of fame. I'm a registered sex offender, and the internet has really been bad for people like me. So I do get called out a lot, but it's not because they recognize me, but not for the reasons I want.
Yeah, it was better when you were unregistered.
That's right. When I was a freelance, that was fun.
When you subcontracted, it was like a lot more. I wanted to ask you about. So I didn't get to the thing that blew me away. So
yes, tell me how great I am.
And you came out to the Nerdist, and there's a law. I don't know if it's federal or if it's just in California. But if you are deaf, you have a right to a signer at a show, whether it's a rock show or right. Is it just California
federal.
Or is it the whole country?
No, it's a federal law. The Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a huge landmark watershed act that allowed access to people with disabilities everywhere to get access to the kinds of things that everybody has access to.
So somebody had requested a signer at this show, and this room was like. I mean, if that room held 125, I'd be shocked. It was probably closer to 100 people. And so it's this little tiny room, but there's a signer on stage, and everybody's going up. And I've been to comedy shows with signers before, and it becomes very indulgent, and people start going, so she gave me a blowjob just so the signer would have to go like that.
yes, blowjob. That's
and the crowd does not get tired of it. One comic after the other can go up and say jerk off and can say fuck you, and the crowd just keeps going. This is so great that this person who's being paid to help people that have an issue is being humiliated. This is so great.
The only people that don't like, I'm sure the deaf people like it too, because they're going like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Blowjob, those are great. The only person that hates it is the interpreter, who's just being forced to be put on display like a little grinder monkey.
Right. So everybody does that, and then you get up there and you go, all right, I'm going to change it up a little bit. How about I'll sign you my jokes and you tell them to the audience? And so you struck gold because this woman happened to have unbelievable delivery. You were signing her jokes, and she was fucking animated. She was nailing it. She was getting huge laughs. She was waiting on laughs. And everybody in the crowd was just like, because I didn't know your history. I mean, I knew about the pedophilia, but I didn't know about your parents. And so that just came out of nowhere.
From the website.
Yeah, from the website. Right.
Right.
That was a cool moment. Has that happened to you before?
Well, that's a good trick, but it only works in very specific. I've done it I think I've done it one other time. The only way that trick works is if the interpreter and the audience doesn't know who I am and that I have deaf parents. Because I think I remember that night, actually, what I did and what I've done the other couple times that I've done that is I pretend to be in some ways mocking the whole thing, right? Yeah. Like the interpreter, the deaf person, the audience, they all think what I'm going to do is like the most ignorant bit you could possibly imagine, where, I pretend to do sign language, and I, again, go back to the default of all stand-up comedians since Shecky Green and the old vaudevillians is, I just make a blowjob reference, and then I force the interpreter to say the word blowjob instead of force her to sign it. So I will start off gesticulating as if I don't know what I'm doing, and then click into actual sign language, thus getting the interpreter to say real jokes, blowing her mind, hopefully blowing the deaf person's mind, and certainly the audience being like, oh shit, it's a rare moment that I can get that exactly right. But I love work. Do you like it working with interpreters beyond the blowjob thing?
Yeah.
It's great. I've never done a bad show where there's an interpreter, because any disruption of the energy in that way, I feel like it just allows everybody to go like, this is weird. We can have fun and we can have a good time here together.
No, it's why every late night talk show has a band leader. Do you really need live music? No, but if a joke bombs and you can go look at Kevin or Paul or whoever and smirk, then it's like all of a sudden the show's got like another dimensionality to it.
Yeah, nothing better than when a joke bombs have a trombonist right behind you, just like playing a little jazz riff.
Yeah. I was just in New York, and I did the Comedy Underground, and they've got this. It's just like 2 or 3 guys playing music on stage, and it just gives those shows like this incredible energy. It's more than just a stand-up show.
I love that so much. I love that so much that when Natasha and I did our Netflix special, we flew Lou, the pianist from the La Jolla Comedy Store, to Austin to play piano between because our show was like, she does a half an hour,
right.
Then she introduces me, then I do a half an hour, then I bring her back up, and then we do couples like live relationship roasting, and so there's a lot of like transitions, right? And having somebody playing piano in the middle of those transitions created this awesome energy. So we brought that guy all the way out just to play piano between acts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what did you do for New Year's, by the way? I saw you moved your show online. Was it completely online, or was it live and also streamed?
No, we were supposed to do Oakland. We've been doing this live show in Oakland at the Grand Lake Theater for like, it's like a tradition at this point. We've done it a bunch of years in a row. And then Omicron dropped, and that hot new Omicron variant dropped, and we just decided that we would call it off and do it online instead. And have you done much online stand-up?
I did it twice, and I was like, I don't think I can do this again. I just
it's not good, but it's not, to me, if you do it right, if it's a good show.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it seems like it should be. It seems like it should be the opposite of everything you've been working towards, and a piece of torture not paralleled since the Iron Maiden. But if it's done correctly, you get like 42% of the feeling of doing well at a comedy club. I mean, or maybe, about 42%. But without that, it can feel good. But the funniest part, especially on New Year's, that was a good show. We had 1,000 people.
We had Maria Bamford, and you had...
we had Atsuko, and we had Caleb Heron, and Brent Weinbach, my wife, and me, and Andrew Michon. And we had about 1,000 people, so that's a really healthy, a lot of people, and they set it up so you could hear the laughs. So it felt good, like we were getting laughs, and it really felt positive. It felt, like I said, like about 1/3 of a real, like, I just killed feeling on stage.
Yeah.
But then the saddest part is, especially on New Year's, is that you reach up and you close your laptop and you look up and you're just in your house, and it's like 11:45 on New Year's Eve, because we didn't do a Pacific time. We did it so we could get everybody from every coast. So it was just like 8:30 to 10 p.m. Pacific, and then we just closed the laptop, and I looked at Natasha and we're like, okay, well, you want to watch some TV, or like, what are we gonna do here?
Yeah,
so
yeah. Now there is something very anticlimactic about doing stand up on a computer, and these Zooms. I wish we could have gotten together in person, but right now I think doing Zoom for another 3 weeks probably makes sense before I start having people come in and do live interviews again.
Well, just so your audience knows, like, if I was in person, like, if you think this interview is scintillating and hilarious, like, you cannot imagine the level that it would be at if I was staring at Greg's beautiful blue eyes in person.
Yeah.
This would be crazy. You wouldn't be able to stand how funny it was.
It actually might get sexual, and then it turns into a whole other streaming platform.
That's right. I would bring out the knickers, the schoolboy knickers, and I would say, you know what I'm into, Greg? Could you put this little schoolboy uniform on? It would be, so we don't want that.
Aggro. I turn into the aggro guy. I have on like a MAGA hat and a paddle. Yeah.
I do wonder about that, by the way. There's how forbidden fruit is always the sweetest, right?
Yeah.
Like in the history of segregationalism, there was all these like fantasies about like, these like plantation women fantasizing about, hooking up with a black guy and blah, blah, blah. There's gotta be there's no way it's not true that out there somewhere is a hardcore MAGA person whose only fantasy is like to fuck a lib cuck woman, and vice versa. There's got to be some like super like Kamala is my queen, RBG for life woman out there that when she closes her eyes and puts on her Hitachi magic wand, what she's picturing is an insurrectionist who's like breaking down the doors of Nancy Pelosi's office to ravage her on Pelosi's desk. It's got to be true.
Of course it's true, because, you know, guys like us, do women want guys like us who keep checking in? Is this good for you? How are your feelings right now? Women don't want that shit. They want to be taken.
Okay, here's the question, Greg. Who do you think in the aggregate is more fun to have sex with? MAGA or the liberal elite?
I think you got to look at it like tag team wrestling. You want the libtard doing all the foreplay. He checks in. Okay. There's a scent. There is caressing. There is communication.
I love that. Once consent is firmly established, then the door opens and out comes the MAGA guy.
Yeah, he's got on the fur hat with the horns.
Yeah, he's blowing like an elk horn with the bang flag that comes down from the cap gun, but it just says Trump 2020. Fuck, let's go, Brandon. That's the guy. I used to actually
and then when you're done, the libtard comes back in and holds you.
That's right. But and you clean up by grabbing the QAnon shaman's fur fawn pants, and that makes a really good cum rag. Like, it's very buoyant, and so he can go off, and in can come the NPR host and hold you and tell you you're beautiful. I used to like when I was a promiscuous boy and before everything became so politicized, so before you hated your political adversary, rather you just disliked them.
Right.
I used to enjoy hooking up with people that were from a strata of culture that was so just truly different from me. I thought there was something really hot about that, like hooking up with, as a like hipster scum that I am, hooking up with like a real mall rat type of person, or like a fancy like saddle ranch like heels and boot cut jeans and heels and that kind of. There was something very, I wouldn't say taboo, but close enough to taboo about like mixing cultures like that I always thought was fun.
I went down, me and my friend were at Danceteria, which is a nightclub. It was a 3-story nightclub in Manhattan. And when me and my friend were like 17, we were there, and we had some blow, and we met these two black girls who were like, they were into, I don't know if it was the coke or us, but we were all together, and they said, "Do you want to go back to our place?" And we were like, "Great." We don't know where they live. We get in the car, and they give us directions to the South Bronx, to a fucking tenement apartment. And we park the car in a spot we're convinced the car will not be there when we come out. And we go into their apartment, and it is like, and I grew up around tenements. I'd been in tenements before, but not in the South Bronx. This was like really fucking scary. And we went in, and we had sex with them. And I was in the living room, and he was in the bedroom. And then we finished, and we came out, and I remember standing in the lobby and us looking back and forth up the street to see if we could run back to our car and get out of there again. It was the most exciting night of my life.
That sounds like a fun night. I have a story like that it really does illustrate the dichotomy between your dick and your mind.
Yeah.
I was in Hollywood, and this girl... and I just started flirting with this girl. She was actually the parking lot attendant at this vintage store, but she was hot to me, and I got her phone number in a bold way. I mean, I usually didn't just approach random people, but I was just like, give me your phone number, and somehow it worked out. And we started texting, and I went down to Long Beach to go do a show that night. And we started texting, and she was being extremely bold and promiscuous. I don't. What's the word? Where she was just basically saying like, "You should have told me you were interested. I would have sucked your dick in the parking lot." I mean, it was like really like, whoa.
Wow.
And so I'm in Long Beach now, and I'm getting horny. Like I'm getting these text messages, and I'm like, oh, okay. I had driven a friend. Here's the thing you got to understand. Okay, so this woman lived in Compton. right?
Okay.
And she Compton is right between Los Angeles and Long Beach. It's on the way home, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about the geography, and I'm getting horny, and I'm like, okay, I drove Jacob Siroff to the club that night because we were going to do a set together. I'm like, I got to get rid of Jacob Siroff like immediately. Somehow Jacob Siroff, comedian, and good Jacob friend of mine.
He's not the kind of guy that can wait in a car in Compton.
No,
he won't be there when you get out. Yeah.
I'm like, I got to get rid of him. Okay, so I find I'm like scrambling through. You know how you get like, there are levels of horniness. I remember well when I was a young man where I would get so horny I would start getting cold. Like I would start shivering. Yeah. I was like, you start to feel like a monkey. You start to feel like an ape again. You're just like, yeah. I was like, that's where I was at. I was like, I got to get Jacob out of here. So I'm running around the club. I find someone that will give Jacob a ride home. And I explain to Jacob, who's also a horn dog at the time like me, so he understands. So then I'm like, great. I'm starting to drive to Compton. You know, the infamous Compton, you know, or I would say the South Bronx of the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
So I get to Compton and I'm driving close to her house and I start texting her like, where is this? And she says, you have to pull into the alley around back. And I'm like, Look, first of all, this woman, I don't know her. I've never really, I met her in a parking lot in Hollywood. I got her phone number. She, in a very unusually aggressive way, was like, I will have sex with you now, tonight. We don't know each other. And I'm like, my brain is going like, this feels but my other brain is going like, just keep moving. And she's like, it actually makes much more sense that this is fake than that it's real. And then I pull into the alley. The alley, you could not set design a place for a nerd Jew from Hollywood to get murdered more exactly if you had an Oscar award winning team than this alley. It's like broken street lights, dirt roads in the back alleys in Compton. Like on one side are these houses, on the other side is an empty field. I would say the kind of place you would dump a body, you know, and I turn onto the alley and my brain is saying, get out of here. This is wrong. There's going to be her and her, brothers or her, boyfriend, and they're going to get in the car. She's not going to be there. They're going to get in the car. They're going to shoot you and take your car and your money. Like, don't go home. This isn't safe. You know that, what's The Gift of Fear, that book?
Yeah.
There was like some famous book that was in the, from 15, 20 years ago that was like basically saying like when your fear instinct, your spidey sense is going off, that is evolutionary information that is telling you are in danger and you should listen to it. It will save your life. That's happening. Yeah. And yet the energy emanating from my crotch is so powerful that I'm continuing to drive forward. Like my dick is driving. My brain is not driving the car. And I just keep going and texting her like, I'm almost here. And like, it's so scary. And you know what? I'm on this podcast, so I think you know what happened that night.
Hey now.
I didn't die. It all worked out. Everything was fine. Although the woman did get in my car and say something incredibly racist. I mean, like opened the door, sat down, unbelievable racism. Okay, let's hook up now. And that's another difficult thing for you to get through, which is like your dick is now my liberal brain is taken. Now I'm safe. But now my liberal brain is saying, oh, this isn't cool at all. Like, what are we doing here? But you know what? Once again, I wasn't driving that night. There was somebody else.
Your dick doesn't see color. It doesn't see racism.
I think the moral of that story is I'm really glad I'm married and a father now and not doing shit like that anymore.
Oh, dude, tell me about it. I think about that all the time. As a lot of our compatriots at the different comedy clubs in town go down by the wayside, I just think, yep, I'm safe. I have nothing to hide.
But beyond even being safe, it's like it sounds arduous. The process of how much energy and effort I used to put into. I don't know if I told you this the last time I was on, but you'll love this as a person that loved sex as much as you did, and I did. I mean, I'm sure you still love it, but that the chase.
Yeah.
And how connected it is to your psychology. This is true. I used to go to the Comedy Store, like in my earlier years in LA. I would go to the Comedy Store back when the Comedy Store was bad, right?
Yeah.
Like where you had a probably, I would say, 65-35 possibility of having a good set versus a bad set, right?
Or even getting bumped by a Wayne brother or Martin Lawrence or somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the time you actually go on, there's a dozen people in the audience, and it's just so the Comedy Store is on Sunset. Deep in the Sunset Strip, not deep west LA, but it's far. It's about 35 minutes from my house, right? So I live on the east side of LA. So I would go up, and if I did well, everything would be fine. I would go home and have a great night. If I bombed, I would get in my car, and I would start on Sunset texting people that I had hooked up with, texting booty calls, right?
Really?
Like it was like a 1-to-1 connection. I would be texting them all the way down Sunset, like, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? Like, somebody, please fix me. Get me out of this bomb. And then if I didn't get a text back from someone by the time I hit Western and Sunset, there was a Winchell's Donuts right there on Western and Sunset. And if nobody hit me back, I would pull into the Winchell's Donuts and I would buy a buttermilk old-fashioned donut.
And I would drive home.
No, I would just eat the donut. But what I'm saying is, it was like that I couldn't find the fix. I couldn't find the sexual carnal fix. Fuck it. You know what? I'm gonna eat a donut. Maybe that'll get me out of this.
Right. So you still have this addictive personality that you've had since you were a kid. So if it played out with drugs and whatever else, and then women and comedy, what would you say? How do you deal with your addictive personality now? What exercise is it?
That's an interesting. I mean, I reject the premise, even though I know that you're right. Right? Mm-hmm. Like the stories I'm telling don't really speak to like the fact that I've gotten rid of that part of my life. I think though, all these stories I'm telling right now are from over 10 years ago. So I really do feel like on some level, age and growing up and becoming a more fully self-actualized human being, I do feel like I'm better. Not healed completely from the weird trauma that was my childhood, but like, I don't know that I'm as caught in that cycle as I once was.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, like the internet, if there's anything that like I would say that I'm addicted to, it's the internet. It's information and scrolling, and it's something that I want so desperately to get rid of, but just can't quite see how you can I really just fantasize about being one of these people that's like, I'm done, and I just don't see it happening. Yeah.
I did get rid of TikTok. I was seriously addicted to TikTok for about a year, where I was watching 2 to 3 hours a day.
And when you do TikTok, you get to it's so inane, most of it. Not to say there aren't talented people on there, but it's so 90% of it is so it's beyond. It's not even good for TikTok. It's so bad that you can't even tell yourself, oh, well, I've gotten some information for my stand-up act. It's like, no, I've just put fucking rotten junk food in my brain for 3 hours.
Yep. And it's junk food that there's a team of chefs that are going into the lab to examine your palate and are coming up with the exact junk food that will make you satiated and will keep you wanting more. It's crazy how it figures you out.
Yeah, it's the dedication of mental faculties to something that matters so unbelievably little feels like it might be the end of it, of all of this stuff. But in a way, it'll be good because climate change is coming. And like, what's going to be better for climate change than us all barely noticing as the seawater rises to our chin? We're just like, oh, I think it'll be fine. And you just keep scrolling through like, oh, that's the evolution of dance. Oh, that's cool. There's something kind of heartening about it.
and you'll see some video of like a volcano with a hurricane behind it and animals running into the fucking burning embers, and you go like, what's this? Oh, it's the end of times. And it's
and then you look
this
up.
Is a live stream.
you look up and the deer is running by you on fire. You're like, oh shit, I'm in the video.
All right, man. I can't think of a better image to go out on a podcast with.
Cool. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, man.
I want to remind people the Endless Honeymoon podcast is available every week on all the platforms that deliver you podcasting. Also, do you still do the one with your brother?
You know, my brother and I worked together once, and my brother is a rabbi, and I'm a comedian, so it's the great seesaw of the Jewish experience.
Yeah.
We are the full gambit. And once in a while, we do things together. We don't do a regular podcast. It's just me and Natasha do a live relationship counseling advice. We should have you on sometime, Greg. That would be fun. It would be fun to have you on.
I would love it. I'd love it. And also, don't forget the book. Check it out.
Kasher in the Rye.
Kasher in the Rye.
It's a good read. I am truly proud of it. To this day, it's the thing I've done that I'm the most proud of in my whole career. So if your listeners are looking for a good read, I promise it's a fun one.
All right, good. All right,
cool.
Man. Thank you so much. I love talking to you. Thanks so much for giving me your time.
Same here, Greg.
We'll see you in the club soon.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
All right, see ya.